Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, Wednesday, September 8th. My name is Anshee Lee, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Security Title Guaranty Corporation of Baltimore. I'm the moderator for this presentation. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. Folks in the audience are in listen-only mode, but feel free to ask any questions, or if you have any comments, enter it in the chat box. We'll take some time to answer and address some questions at the end. A reminder for those in Maryland, Louisiana, and South Carolina who are seeking continuing education credit, please keep your focus on the webinar and participate in the polls throughout this presentation. Today, we're excited to have co-founder and CEO of Certified, Tom Cronkrite, and Stephen Doherty of the U.S. Secret Service speaking on the topic of wire fraud. Gentlemen, on behalf of everyone at Security Title, thank you for carving out some time for this important topic. And without further ado, I'll hand off the microphone to Tom.
Great. Anshee, thank you, and all the team members at Security Title. Excited to just share with you some insights and learnings around what I think is now grown into the #1 issue relative to real estate transactions, and that's securing these transactions from the threat of wire fraud, business email compromise, and what Stephen and I are seeing on a fairly regular basis. So a little bit of background. I'm a recovering lawyer by trade, a large title agency owner in Michigan. I am a wire fraud victim, so I've unfortunately been through this. The things that we're about to describe today, back in 2015, I was a lead witness in a federal trial on a fairly high-level cyber syndicate that was disassembled back in 2018, 17, and 18, and just have dedicated the vast majority of my time right now to making sure that the industry is protected from this event. And we'll kind of dissect what that means more clinically. Now, a good friend of mine and just absolute warrior out there is Stephen Doherty from the U.S. Secret Service. Stephen, if you want to give a little bit about your background, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for having me. As Tom said, I'm Steve Doherty with U.S. Secret Service. In particular, I work in a unit called the GIOC, the Global Investigative Operations Center. And from there, we investigate and analyze large-scale cybercrime trends, particularly with transnational organized crime. And my specific mission desk that I'm a part of is the Business Email Compromise Mission Desk, which is just a more fancy name for wire fraud. And we're just seeing it in the real estate world, just running rampant right now. So we're really glad you guys are on today. Hopefully we can get you guys educated on this matter. And our goal is to have you guys educated so you can be the first line of defense, top of where it starts with you guys. So say we get rolling.
All right, let's jump in. So first off, we're just gonna walk through some stats, and Stephen, I'll have you lead this, but not before Anshee. We have a series of poll questions, and I think there's 3 or 4 total. Anshee, I'll let you release the first poll question, and this will kind of help us guide the conversation and where we spend the most time in some of these themes.
Sounds great. So my first poll question is, how frequently, actually, let me launch it first. How frequently was a cybercrime reported to the IC3 in 2020? And there's 4 options, 1 per day, 1 per hour, 1 per minute, more than 1 per minute. We'll give the folks in the audience a few moments to respond. It feels like 2020 was so long ago. I'll be honest with you, I was thinking about it with the pandemic. It seems like 2020 never happened, but I know that these numbers were released relatively earlier this year, and I was a little shocked to hear it.
It's not still 2020?
Anshee, as they have questions, would you like them put in the chat panel as we go through this? I forgot to mention.
Oh, great for bringing that up. There is a question section in their toolbar. Chat, if you have just any additional comments or want to just engage in this conversation, that's great. If not, the questions box would be the best. I think I've already answered one person's question, especially if they're having any technical difficulties there. So I'll be monitoring that throughout.
Perfect.
So, all right, looks like we've got 82% of the vote in, and I'm going to go ahead and close it out in a few moments, and we'll take a look at the results. All righty, so I'm closing out the poll, and I will share the results with everyone. It looks like it was kind of a mixed bag. 45% of you thought 1 per minute. A good 24% had 1 per hour, and then rounding out at even 30% more than 1 per minute.
All right, let's dive in. Can you see my screen, Anshi?
Yes.
All right, Stephen, I'll let you roll with this. Let's dispel the notion and some of the stats.
Yep. All right. So some of you were spot on. IC3 gets a report roughly every 43 seconds. That is drinking through the proverbial fire hose in terms of cyber fraud. And to frame it around those numbers, it's not just wire fraud that's in there. There's also romance scams. There's credit card scams. All sorts of other stuff gets lumped into that. But BEC is the largest amount of loss we see associated with those reports. On average, we see about 6,000 businesses a month that are targeted through BEC attacks, many of which are very successful. So when we look at numbers, the actual numbers, right now we're looking at loss that's probably approaching about $40 billion is the sort of rough estimate we have. We were tracking at 26 billion, then 30 billion, and now we think at the end of, once we have 2020 all accounted for, it will be approaching $40 billion, which is just a tremendous amount of loss. The amount of ransomware loss right now kind of doesn't approach that. Ransomware is a different animal, where ransomware has a lot of damage it can do to infrastructure and ancillary costs, whereas BEC and wire fraud are direct losses. Particularly, it looks like 1 in 3 real estate transactions are targeted, Tom. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys participated in this or if you're members of Alta, but Alta posted their annual wire fraud survey earlier this year. The results were disseminated in March, I believe. And we as an industry cited that 1 in 3 transactions were targeted for some sort of fraud. And when I say targeted, they're targeting everything, guys. They're targeting, let's start with the buyer EMD, then the buyer cash to close, then the new loan proceeds, right? The direction of funds from another title company. Anything coming inbound to fund a real estate transaction, they're trying to get their hands on. Well, the money comes safely in, and now they're trying to redirect any disbursement wire. So mortgage payoffs, we'll get into that one quite a bit. Seller net proceeds, HOA, commissions. We ran down a commission one last week, Stephen. One of those was commissions. We're now seeing them move into commercial, construction draws. So let's take construction draws a second. I don't know about you, but I'm in a pretty conservative area. Our average home price doesn't even touch the national average here in West Michigan, but people aren't digging a hole in the ground for less than $400,000 of construction cost. That's the construction cost. So if it's a 6-month build, we do some simple math. You know, you've got $60,000 to $70,000 per draw that are taking place on a monthly basis. So we're starting to see them move into that. So it's just a very prevalent space. It's an active space, and that's why, you know, it's so important. So Stephen, why don't you go through this? I mean, you can kind of run through the, you know, what uniquely happened between 19 and 20. I think that's fascinating.
Yep. So these are IC3s, the numbers reported by IC3. So these numbers actually are, I say, relatively low because, one, many people don't know to report to IC3. 2, they don't understand what actually happened to them with the crime. So these numbers are actually really underreported. But we saw sort of just an absolute exponential increase in rise BEC from 19 to 20 to 21. Mainly, one of the main reasons, obviously, is because of the pandemic. A lot more people went virtual. We call it the surface area, the threat surface grew, where you still had that everyday face-to-face interaction was taken out, and you have people just taking emails, taking these messages at face value and acting on them and sending their transaction, when a lot of them were part of a sophisticated BEC attack or spoof.
Yeah, in what we're seeing, so we added, certified team added the potential increase. If you saw 19 to 20, to Stephen's point, you had over $1 trillion of unemployment scams, PPP, PPE, things that distracted them from what was a pretty heavy ramp up going from 17 to 18 to 19. And now it just feels like they're back at it, and real estate being one of those targets. So if we just assume a 30% year-over-year increase, which I think is very conservative, we're going to have a much bigger problem that's staring us in the face in just a handful of years. And what's interesting, and Stephen, I'll have you backfill this, is, well, why don't you go through this? Who is behind this? Because I think there's a notion that the industry, and I'll just say this, guys, and I don't mean to call out anyone on the call today, but I've been in this field now for almost 3 years, and I think the industry by and large is led by an optimism bias, a bias that every day we wake up and say, today's gonna be better than yesterday. And, this whole thing, some of the risks, especially wire fraud risk, isn't gonna happen to me. I'm in a small town, or I'm in a rural market, or I'm in a community where everybody knows each other. And I'm not even sure, and what I know about this is like lone actors that are working independently. And Stephen, maybe you could add color to what is really going on, like who's behind this type of activity on a daily, weekly, monthly basis.
Certainly, yeah. So, the preconceived notion of that lone hacker sitting in their basement working this, is out the window. That's not what's going on here. What we're up against is actually what I refer to as enterprise business model. These criminal organizations are acting as if they're a business with the same amount of efficiency. It starts at the top with the C-suite. They're the ones who design the attacks, figure out what they want to target, whether it's real estate, healthcare, education. They figure out how they want to do it. So they're like, okay, cool, we want to hit real estate. So they need to do a couple things here. They, one, need to set up their sort of IT wing is what I call it. And that's who's going to carry out the hacking. They're going to carry out getting into the email accounts and monitoring them so they can really harvest the good information about a real estate transaction that's going to happen. Then they know this is going to occur. So then they set up all the things to weaponize it, the spoof domains, figure out how to write the emails, stuff like that. And they know the money is going to move. So they need a financial sector, a financial side to help facilitate moving the money. And essentially what that is, they're financial directors located all over the world who have their different money mule networks. Mule networks comprised of different people, whether they're knowing money mules or unwitting money mules, which is more popular right now. Those are romance scam victims, work from home scam victims, stuff like that. They set up and move all the money. Then you actually have a recruitment wing. There's a wing that goes out and finds all these people and does this for the C-suite, and they provide them as a service to the C-suite. Other than that, you actually, there's a sort of an admin role you can play that they play in these organizations. For instance, if they don't want to launder funds using wires and virtual currency or gift cards or however they want to do it, instead they want to do it with cards. They'll have an administrator set up a little card business that he's saying he's buying and moving and selling cars while receiving wire fraud funds. And then lastly, you have enforcers, to say it. Tom's well aware of the way they work, and we say there's no honor amongst thieves. And with BEC, it's the same. If you're working, say, as a financial director, you're supposed to send off your cut, but you decide not to. The C-suite will have somebody who will come to your house to make sure you send the money the way you're supposed to. Otherwise, there will be repercussions. So it's a full-scale criminal organization from top to bottom here that we're dealing with, and they've gotten very efficient, very complex, and are really hard to combat right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen chat boards and telegrams recently, Stephen, where it's almost like ransomware as a service, BEC as a service. So if you think about it, I use the analogy, these are my words, not Stephen's, but almost like a digital cartel. So if you think about the cartel and they have a product that they're trying to sell, and whatever the product it is, you got to buy land, you got to plant seeds, you got to fertilize and water and ultimately harvest, then you got to manufacture, right? You've got to process and manufacture, and then you have to distribute, then you have to sell, and you got to find all the money back to the point of beginning. And that is incredibly intensive and risky for everyone involved because it's a very analog process, right? Think of this as digitizing that, where it's borderless. There's very little cost of goods sold, and it can operate on a 24/7, 365-day cycle, where your barrier to entry or your startup cost is a little bit of knowledge, a device, and an internet connection, and you can really get into this game quite easily. And I think the challenge with real estate is that real estate transactions are just simply so visible because active transactions are required to be posted on the MLS, either commercial or residential, because of the open market listing requirements. When those contracts or those opportunities or properties go under contract, that change between open and either pending or contingent status is tracked, and then the fraudster can easily look up ownership of based on open public records. So it's one of those that we took a step back and really looked at it. There's just so much readily available information around real estate ownership, the representation of owners, and the transaction itself in real time. And oh, by the way, the cherry on top is it's the highest asset value of anything that anybody's going to transfer in their lifetime, right? So it's like you put all this together. Oh, and another one is there's 6 to 7 parties working together, and it's incredibly fragmented transaction. And we'll get into this, but what we found is they only have to compromise one person in the transaction, and everyone is exposed. Because you don't know if they're after the cash to close or the incoming wire for EMD or the mortgage proceeds, or the end game is a payoff or a seller net proceeds or some disbursement or related wire. So everyone's feeling the pain. Here's a quote from Secret Service, just like Stephen mentioned. I won't read this one, but we're dealing with multinational enterprises with funding, talent, and a playbook. And they took the gains from last year, all the unemployment scams and PPE and everything that they were able to harvest from last year, and now refocusing on ransomware and BEC. We're feeling the pain. So as I stand here as the CEO of Certified and one trying to prevent it, know that in our agency, and we open and close a lot of files a month, we're seeing the same garbage. We're seeing the quote unquote, updated CD from our title underwriter, or here's a bulletin, or here's, open this closing disclosure from a lender that you're not expecting it from. Matt's a good friend of mine, and we've helped him, Stephen, we've helped him in a couple of recoveries now. We're all feeling the pain. I think the outlier, just to kind of future pace how big the problem is, we're going to start to see the insurance community pivot and limit the amount of coverage that is even currently available for us for social engineering, fidelity, and cybercrime coverage. I was told recently that basically every cyber program that insures small to medium-sized businesses, which is all of us in the title space, except for the underwriters, is underwater. It's at risk. And I think that is going to make it even more challenging if we don't get our heads around this and start to defend against it. So, Stephen, quickly, what is business email compromise? And then we want to walk through some examples, and then we'll talk about funds recovery.
Yep. So business email compromise, or BEC, is a cyber fraud attack where essentially what they do is they get into an email account and they get information that I call contemporaneous and privileged, meaning it's timely, and you would only think the person you're doing business with has that information. So it gives you a level of trust. So, you feel safe to transfer your money to the account they said they were going to do. You feel safe to follow any instructions that are in there because you would only think that the person you're doing business with should have that information. Once that information is received and stolen, it's then weaponized to convince you or the real estate agent or whoever may be to send a wire transfer or other financial transaction to a fraudster's account.
In real estate, and I alluded to this, the way that it plays out, and we've seen this in almost every instance. Steve and I have been involved in just under 100 recoveries year to date, just in real estate, is that they will profile a transaction, they'll profile somebody in a transaction. Let's take the real estate agent. So they'll go on to Zillow or Trulia or just the real estate agent's Facebook, and they'll start to see where he or she normally operates. They'll profile the listing activity of a real estate agent, right? They're a center node of all this because of all the transaction volume that they'll have visibility to. Then they'll fish that real estate agent. And they could fish us and a mortgage lender, but let's just talk real estate agent. They fish the real estate agent with a well-crafted email. The email could be transaction related. Hey, I see the listing on 123 Mayflower. Here, sign in here to get a copy of the survey or the well and septic report or the HOA statement or whatever. Could be something personal. Hey Jack, hey Sally, here's a $5 gift card if you just give me feedback on your recent whatever, because I saw you were up in, Mackinac Island or something on vacation. So it could be something like that. But either way, they're trying to put something in front of this individual, this real estate agent in this example, so that they can gain email account access. And when Stephen talks about business email compromise, what it is they want access to an email account. They harvest and monitor information, and then they monetize that through wire fraud. So business email compromise and monetize through the manipulation or the social engineering of somebody to transferring funds to a fraudulent account, thinking they're sending it to a trusted party. So they fish the real estate agent. They see the real estate agent on average has 7 to 10 deals in flight. They're monitoring those deals at what stages they're in. Think about the access they have, guys, especially on the buyer side. I got the purchase agreement. I've got all the addendums. I've got typically a preliminary CD or application letter that comes in. They can see quickly the construct. Just seeing a purchase agreement and whether or not it's conventional, cash, or FHA, you know exactly the amount of cash to close almost to a number that you could calculate. This is not hard stuff if you think about it, and they know that. So then they strike by impersonating the title company, typically to a buyer, saying, hey, rather than sending a wire or rather than bringing a check in, we need a wire for your cash to close, and we need it today or else it's going to disrupt the closing. Or because of the COVID-19, Delta variant, we're short-staffed right now. We need to get the money early so we can balance the numbers. And then the buyer in this example is tricked into thinking they're sending it to you, the title company, and they send it to somebody else. And all of this is happening behind the curtain, and none of us know about it until somebody shows up to a closing, like happened yesterday or last Friday. I had to make a phone call to literally, we helped in a recovery, and the law firm wanted me to talk to the buyer and the buyer's agent about what just happened. 9 o'clock closing in the state of Georgia. I'm describing to a victim what just went down. And it's, if you've ever, and I hope you never have to experience this, this is a life event for most consumers. One, they can't believe it. It creates incredible emotional and other forms of stress on them. And it's just a rinse repeat process in real estate. On the outgoing side, let's take mortgage payoffs. So they fish the real estate agent, the listing agent, they fish you. They see that there's a mortgage payoff being administered. They will impersonate Wells or Mr. Cooper or Nation Star, whoever it happens to be. They send an updated statement either through email or through the fax machine. And if you're not on your toes and you don't have a point of reference, then that wire goes out, and you typically don't know about that until the seller calls 30 to 45 days later saying, I just got a late payment statement, and I thought this was taken care of at closing, and then the money's gone. So that's why real estate is, and I didn't mean to belabor that, that's why real estate is
No.
such a
I
big
wanted to
target.
drive it on like that.
Yep.
That was perfect.
All right. Let's talk about actual emails. So we're going to go through some emails since like March of this year. These are the final emails that led a buyer to send their life savings to a fraudster. And I want to pull out some themes. I want to pull out some language that you can start to see that are common to go back and train not only your employees and your internal customer, but your external customer, your real estate agents, your attorneys, your builder developers, your anybody that feeds kind of the top of the deal funnel for you. So the first is just urgency. So, I clicked again. So you can see here, you need to wire out, you need to wire to our account today. If you can take care of the wire now and forward, I'll forward you the wiring instructions. So taking a step back, what we typically see when the fraudster is conducting the final leg of the scam is there's new or updated information. The person needs to act on that information. So there's an immediate kind of temporal aspect to it. And the third is there's a consequence. Something will happen to their interest in a negative way if they don't, again, act on this newer updated information. So the middle one here, you can see both COVID and, hey, I'm busy, so just trust what I'm saying in this email. Due to the current pandemic, all closing funds should be wired out of the trust account today. You need to wire today. And hey, if you have any questions, I'll be busy with limited access to my phone. We see that all the time. And just shoot me an email back. The one on the right, I've said this before, use of the word kindly. I'll bet you of the almost 100 recoveries we've been involved with just this year, 90% of them you can see in the email string the use of the word kindly somewhere. Please see the attached, meaning the attached wiring instructions. Kindly update the closing statement accordingly. The one on the left here is sad. So Madison was a buyer. The fraudster made a mistake. They sent a set of wiring instructions and it was 1 digit off and the wire was returned to her. Fraudster, noticing the money didn't land, updated the wiring instructions, sent her new wiring instructions along with this email. Kindly rectify, meaning kindly resend and then confirm when it's done. Urgency and confirmation, can you send the wire out? Can you confirm payment ahead of the closing? Why they're asking for confirmation is that wire transfers are immediate. They don't require any seasoning once they land into the fraudster's hands. And then they can be converted to cryptocurrency, pulled out in cashier's checks, in cash, gift cards, moved to other accounts, all the above. Kindly, again, on the right, I just have a few more here. Kindly proceed to get back with us the confirmation. So there's kindly and confirmation. Kindly execute the wire transfer today and email me a copy of receipt afterwards. The funds must be wired prior to closing. Please see the attached instructions. Look at this last sentence or the second to the last sentence on the one on the right. And this is a trend that we're seeing. We will not, it's a misspell, accept a certified check or personal check. So one of the trends we're seeing, and I just want to say this because I'll forget if I don't, is that it doesn't matter if you're in an area where buyers typically bring cashier's checks or personal checks to closing for their closing obligations. Because what the fraudsters recognize is that if they can just create an excuse as to why a check cannot be received and then introduce wiring instructions, they have a pretty good hit rate on redirecting that buyer to a wire rather than the original intent of a check. So one of the things that we've done as an agency that we're strongly lobbying for as new best practice is making sure that when at order entry, you identify who the buyer is, you send them a proper fraud notice to alert them of the risk that could face them and what to watch out for, and put into their hands your wiring instructions with confirmation that they received it. And what that does is it provides you the ability to kind of discharge that standard of care while setting them up for success early in the transaction. A few more here. We asked you to proceed and complain. So this was, they sent international wiring instructions and then they needed to send domestic. So this was another one where they had to resend and then it led to a fraudulent transfer. The middle one, kindly acknowledge receipt, confirm. And then the one on the right, please make arrangements for this to be paid today by wire and send me confirmation. Stephen, before we go to payoffs, anything else to add on kind of the buyer side as far as trends?
I mean, you should definitely get the word kindly tattooed on your body somewhere. But no, you nailed it there. But buyer trends, I mean, obviously they're hopping on the opportunity. They know that these are not muscle memory transactions for the buyers. So they're doing everything they can to get it moved to a fraudster's account. So all these different examples are great to educate your people on the red flags of BEC.
I think the other thing that was interesting, and it came out last week, that 30% of all real estate transactions year to date were cash transactions. So never before have we seen in our industry, and that's because of low inventory, the need to have the most competitive offer in the hands of a seller that's sitting on 20 offers. It's cooling down a little bit right now, but leading up to kind of this point in time, we have more money moving directly between consumers and title companies than we've seen previously, just based on how hot the real estate market is. And again, they know that. So on mortgage payoffs, so let's go through payoffs. Payoffs are the #1 disbursement fraud vector. There isn't even a close second. Yes, we've seen and have been engaged in seller net proceeds, and those can be pretty substantial, but the payoff is kind of the holy grail for them. Here are some emails that, again, final email that led to typically a title company or a law firm dispersing to a fraudulent account thinking that it's the mortgage payoff, it's the mortgage bank or the mortgage servicer. Revised payoff and correct instructions misspelled. Middle one, revised payoff statement and updated clauses. Kindly use this for your files. Updated payoff we received this morning. Please confirm receipt. So just as a takeaway, you have to think and train your teams on some of the themes, right? The use of the word kindly, updated or new instructions. Please confirm, especially if you have a mortgage lender asking you to confirm when you sent the wire. That's never going to happen. You can barely get the payoff itself. Like, they will never communicate that much with you. Urgency, like, please confirm now. You got to get it out now. I mean, today, again, the mortgage lender could care less. Either add the per diem through the good through date or add a little bit more. I mean, we tell our teams the risk of the payoff actually goes down month by month because they may be making a mortgage payment. So it doesn't go up, it goes down. COVID, and then, hey, I'm busy, you know, just don't try to call me, send me an email. So, Stephen, your thoughts, and I can go through these as well, but just how we start to lower the BEC risk. And I know just based on what we're doing today, education is a huge piece of that, and I can go through the rest of them.
Yeah. So education, I believe, is the #1 defense against business email compromise. The way I set up my mission desk in my unit, I like to focus on 3 separate things to really combat BEC. First thing we do is obviously our rapid response and recovery efforts that you and I have worked so hard upon, just to try to make victims whole as quickly as we can, get that money back to them, and cut off the spigot for our criminals. Our second line that we do is obviously our investigations and the intelligence we gain through those. And so we share that. We try to get out the new threat vectors that are out there, the current trends. And then lastly is our education and awareness sector. We're constantly trying to push out this information to you guys because, again, I can't stress it enough. It's the first line of defense and the best line of defense we have. Tom, if you want to touch on some of the other ones we have here.
No, totally agree. So to dive deeper into a few of these things, culture, I believe that like any threat or any change, it starts at the top. So for those of you that are owners, attorneys, managers, team leads, it starts with us at the leadership position saying, look, we didn't create this problem, but there are things that we're going to lean into it and we're going to intentionally address it like we address other forms of risk. And I think that culture of curiosity and compliance has to be fostered. From there, you can start to educate transparently your employees and your referral partners on what is the risk, how does it face each of us, and what to watch out for. And be as transparent as possible in that. I've openly shared my story, not because it hit the news or because some big article was published, but because it's just part of our story. And yes, we're turning that into something good, but it needs to be part of all of our stories. Because, like I say, I think, and I mentioned this at NS3 last week, there's 2 types of buyers, those that have and those that will be approached with a wire fraud solicitation. Same is true for title agents. Those that have gone through this, or those that have recently been, solicited to wire funds to a fraudulent account. Technology, and I know that the industry by and large has not been a tech-forward industry, and I'm speaking as an industry participant. But technology can create levers and automations that we can't do at scale just because of human error and distraction and busyness. And this isn't just like certified in what we can do to prevent wire fraud. This is everything from email monitoring to, updating programs and making sure that, you've got antivirus and anti-malware and proper VPN connections and multi-factor authentication and things that it's just a blocking and tackling of your network infrastructure that has to be more secure. And this is a level of investment that if you haven't made, I really challenge you to lean in, either develop an internal team or hire a skilled third-party team that can come alongside you and help in that. Money is that's the end game. So all of this, they're going to monetize somewhere. Ransomware. They're going to lock you out. They're going to monetize it. I want Bitcoin, and I'll get you back into your system. BEC. I'm directing wire transfers to fraudulent accounts, and I'm going to take that money quickly and try to avoid detection and recall. So making sure that you're clinically reviewing your procedures around incoming and outgoing funds transfers. We were recently involved in a $21+ million recovery about 10 days ago. And over the weekend, I was talking to the president of that company, and he's asking me for advice. How do you handle this situation relative to incoming funds? How do you verify when you've got an attorney involved or you've got multiple wires going out on a commercial deal? And it's those types of conversations that we need to start to have a little bit more of. And then last is insurance. And my philosophy on insurance, and look, we're all in the insurance business, which is kind of weird, is I just check all the boxes and write the check. I don't know what it all covers, but I just want everything I can get right now. But I think it is time, if you're not working with, there's two types of insurance that we need to be worried about. I'm not worried about the slip and fall because it's icy outside. The general liability stuff is easy. But the professional E&O and fidelity side versus cyber and cyber crime are two very different worlds. And you got to make sure that you're working with companies that understand the interaction between both worlds. Well, I failed to do a callback, and therefore I just lost $2 million. Is that an E&O? Is that a fidelity? Is that a cyber crime? Is it social engineering? Is it all the above? I mean, those are the things that are hard to dissect, and you got to have an insurance company that understands, where the risk really lies and whether or not you're protected. So, all right, poll question 2. So Anshi, I'm going to allow you to launch poll question 2, and then we're going to talk about funds recovery for the next 15 minutes or so.
Great. All right, I'm going to launch poll question 2, and the question is, what is the average wire fraud loss in real estate? Under 50,000, between 50,000 to 100,000, 100,000 to 200,000, or D, over 200,000? And we'll give the audience a few moments to respond. And Tom, I'll divulge while we're waiting for responses that I have used the word kindly in emails in the past, so I will I'll make sure that I stop that. I'll have to find another word to use.
I was going to say, Stephen, if I get a tattoo, it's going to be directed towards my wife that says, "Speak to me kindly."
There you go.
All righty, so we've got about 80% of the vote. We'll give a few more seconds for the last little bit. And I will go ahead and close out the poll now. All righty, I'm going to share the responses with everyone. Looks like it's been overwhelming 43% with over $200,000. So either they're like playing Price is Right and just go high, or they really do believe it's a really high amount. And 34% with the in between 100 to 200K. 18, so a good 20, almost 20%, a fifth of the audience between 50 and 100. And 4%, a decent amount of folks said under 50,000.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a trick question, but let me say why. The recoveries that we've been involved in this year, just under 100. I think the average, Stephen, was about almost $340,000 per recovery.
Mm-hmm.
The incoming is typically a little bit less. So our typical buyer cash to close EMD, those hover kind of sub 200, where the disbursement wire, the mortgage payoffs, and some of the larger net proceeds, but particularly mortgage payoffs, those do hover typically north of 300. But I would say though that is an increase, I would argue probably 80 to 100,000 on average just over the last 12 to 18 months. And I think that's reflective of, just think about what home values have done, right? You may be sitting in a market 18 months ago, my average home value was 320, and now you're clipping above 400, right? And you're just seeing more swings of cash. Stephen, do you agree with that?
Yeah, not even just across BEC in general. So across every industry we can think of, the average you're looking at about is between 130,000 and 150,000 per loss per successful BEC attempt. And like I said, they're launching 6,000 of these a month. That makes these incredibly lucrative for these guys. And so, I mean, it's fascinating to sit there and watch them work. I mean, I've gotten on the inside and I've seen it, and they sit there all day. They have teams of guys who just pound emails and just keep sending them. They'll send hundreds a day, and it only takes a couple to really be successful. It only takes one to really hurt one of your clients, making them a really bad victim. So it's just, that's how malevolent and then how, again, efficient they can be with these. And just to put in perspective, the average bank robbery, when I'm talking about where you wear a mask, going with your gun, only averages about $3,000 in loss. So what would you rather do? Sit at your computer, send some emails, hopefully you get 150 grand in a day, or you try to go rob a bank, and who knows what will happen if you do that.
Crazy. All right. So what happens? So God forbid there's a wire that goes awry. Let's talk about the recovery side of it. Before I do, I want to show you and kind of read you into how coordinated the distribution of wiring instructions are. So here's an example. I show you this because it's on our brand here, Sun Title in Michigan. We're headquartered in Grand Rapids. And before I show it to you, just at a high level, understand that none of us can prevent a buyer from receiving fraudulent wiring instructions that look like they're coming from us. No one can prevent that. That is a simple spoof. No one can prevent somebody from creating closingagent1@gmail.com and making it look like it's coming from an escrow officer of any of our brands. Okay, so we're not trying to educate you on a silver bullet that doesn't exist. What exists is how prepared and how educated is the recipient of this information to detect that something is off before money moves. That's the win here. So for example, here's some wiring instructions that were sent to a buyer. It looks like it's going to some Mountain American credit union. You can see this on the bottom. But a lot of these PDFs have additional information that are packed into them. In this case, we were able to disassemble this PDF. We found 58 different Money Mule accounts listed in the document. And then we're able to unpack 91 different logos of title companies that would be spoofed. So for example, hey, I'm trying to defraud somebody in the Midwest or in Grand Rapids. Oh, let's use the Sun Title logo here. You see in the fifth column, and a bank that may be in the Midwest, so it doesn't seem so far off. Oh, we got a scam running in California. Let's hit, Orange Coast or whoever it happens to be, and let's grab a Wells Fargo account in this roster here somewhere in the state of California or Washington. And they do that at scale, and they're using, Stephen mentioned it, how coordinated they are. They're using technology against us. So in one set of instructions, you can see at scale that they're trying to defraud potentially or impersonate hundreds of different title companies with accounts open across the country. And I could parade another 20 sets of these that read a very similar script. All right, Steve, let's walk through. I just learned that I sent money, or a buyer sent money to a fraudulent account. What do we do? Because a lot of times people just, if they haven't gone through it before, you end up in a state of stress and almost paralysis at the moment when you need to be acting as quickly as possible. Stephen, you there? Oh, maybe I lost him.
I'm not sure. Stephen, can you hear us?
There you go. You're back.
Okay, there you're back, Stephen. I didn't know if you want to walk through this, or I could walk through the flow, and you could add texture. Totally up to you.
Yeah, I'll hit you. So, God forbid one of these does happen to you. We stress this enough. Time is money, guys. This money moves within a matter of minutes once it hits an account. So first things first is, you guys realize you fell victim to this. Notify your bank immediately. They have the most power in this situation. They can initiate the Swift wire recall. Make sure they do a wire recall. Wherever they land, make sure they can work with that other bank to freeze the funds in those accounts. And then if there's any other secondary transfers, to locate those as well. So hour one, notify your bank. First things first. Yep. Next, step two is you can go to, the best thing to do is go to ic3.gov. It's very structured in the data you provide to them. You'll have to provide sort of a incident description, the sending bank, and particularly the receiving bank where your funds are received. Once you have that, that's great. So bank first, then file an IC3 complaint.
Make sure when you do that, if you need to retain the complaint number and print off or save down as a PDF what shows up on your screen, because you won't be able, it's not like you're creating a username and password in an account. You're not going to be able to get it back. So we've had a lot of people that didn't realize that when they submit it, and sometimes that IC3 complaint number will be used by the receiving bank or, Stephen's team or whatever, just to grab information. And this is what it looks like. So to Stephen's point, your name, business name, the address, your contact information, the victim bank name, that's your bank. So what bank was involved to send? This would be the initiating bank, we call it. And then the recipient bank down there. So you can see here is like Wells Fargo Freedom Mortgage being spoofed. So where did the money go? So initiating, receiving, the transaction amount, and if money was actually sent. So you can report actual attempts or live transfers where money landed. You're describing a little bit of
and
the
we encourage you to
incident.
report both.
Yeah, you're right. Yep. And here they marked it was a spoof fax, information about people who victimized you. Typically, you don't know. You're just getting a random email address like closingagent1@gmail. And then they want other information. Hey, is there an email? Can you give us the whole email address? Can you give us the email header? I mean, some of that stuff just, if you haven't been through it, a little hard to understand. But know that you are making a statement under the U.S. code that says, I'm not, like, everything I'm doing here is truthful and you can rely on it. But that's kind of the flow of the IC3. And then, Stephen, really, this is more about like contacting federal law enforcement, whether the FBI or the Secret Service locally, just making contact with federal authorities in your area to see if they can add a little more weight or visibility into what's going on.
Yeah. So this is both true for FBI and Secret Service. For Secret Service, it's just secretservice.gov, and then same thing, field offices. From there, you'll report it to the duty desk, who then will report it to me to start working on recovery. Generally, that's the way it works. So report it to my unit, to the Global Investigative Operations Center, so we can get moving on it.
Yep. Then you're probably going to contact legal counsel. From there, you may contact all banks in the chain. So what we found is there's always typically you initiating the wire to one account. You're typically not initiating to 3 accounts, because that would be a spinning red light, right? But then from there, they could quickly move from that initial receiving account to other accounts. So in our fraud example, it went from Grand Rapids to New York, from New York down to 3 separate accounts in Texas in the matter of a few hours. We call that, the double or triple hop of the money. So you need to try to gain visibility, like what is the status? Are there funds available in that initial receiving account, or were there withdrawals or transfers or anything subsequent to that transfer that the fraudsters have done? And what's interesting is there's kind of 2 types of money mules. Those that are receiving money into accounts, but they think they're helping a friend online, or they're thinking they're working for an employer that's paying them in the accounts payable or receivable department of a fake company. Those are like non-complicit. And then there's complicit. and Steve and I have run into these where it's like chop chop, money comes in, money goes out. Like we had a situation earlier this year where over $300,000 goes to Money Center Bank, and the same day the money mule walks in and withdraws 12 cashier's checks for the exact amount of that transfer, and no red light went off at that bank branch. And you'd think, how in the world can that ever happen? So that's why it's important to kind of get visibility, if you can, into what's happening with the money. Stephen, anything to add there?
No, that's perfect right there.
And then the insurance carrier. So I know no one wants to file a claim because it's like, look, I didn't lose my cell phone, but I'm just saying it's missing, so I don't want to file a claim because you're going to tag my insurance. But sometimes they have recovery teams, and you have a contractual duty to notify within a short period of time so that they can mitigate their claim loss and help in those recovery efforts. So notifying E&O, cyber, anybody that may have an interest in either helping you or ultimately writing a check to make you whole has to be notified quickly. And then contacting local authorities. And I'm not jaded on this. It's just from a practical standpoint. And for those of you that are attorneys on the phone, you'll appreciate this. Once it crosses state lines, your city or county or even state police department, I have found, will burn through a lot of precious time trying to understand what's really going on, where that energy could be expended making sure that you're in contact with federal authorities that do have jurisdiction over a 50-state and even internationally with their counterparts. But that said, file a police report, send that out to the insurance company, maybe your underwriters if you're required to notify, and ultimately get that on record. But that's why we kind of push that back a little further. And then hour 5, if you're not able to get to this earlier, is understanding what happened. So who was compromised? And I say that because they're not redirecting the wire on its way to the Federal Reserve or out of the Federal Reserve to the destination bank. What they're doing is it was failed to begin with. And it was failed to begin with because somebody's account was breached. You have to make sure it wasn't your account. And we can help you with this. We've got a great partner that you have to have a post-forensic audit done. You can't assume it's always somebody else that was compromised, even though you haven't detected anything else suspicious other than the wire gone missing. And then having an incident response plan, I can't stress this enough, and this is just because of learnings that we've had, is set up a team, the documentation, and run the drill in advance. So create an incident response plan. This is part of the ALTA standards, and it's going to be more expanded in the new ALTA standards that we're working through. That covers business email compromise, ransomware, and other types of cyber threats. If this is too heavy of a lift to do internally, you can hire a third party, and they can help you through the creation and strategy of an IRP. Determine the scope and breach of loss. Contain it. So, hey, it looks like there's a breach. It looks like there's a breach I have to report. Do I have this thing siloed and I understand the scope of what just happened? This is really related to not only ransomware, but email compromise. And then that triggers either under your contracts or under state law, some federal laws, that there is a post-incident requirement that may take place. I got to notify victims. I got to roll them in detection and monitoring services. I might have the insurance bureau or a state agency that I have to notify. Those types of things that you have to get ahead of. And then you got a post game. You got to do what's called a post-mortem. What do we learn? How are we going to prevent it? What makes us a better, more secure version of ourselves because this happened? And I think without that, you kind of lose the benefit of the learning when that happens. So, Stephen, anything to add there? I know I blew through that quickly, but I want to have at least a few minutes for Q&A here.
Yeah, no, that's perfect right there.
Cool. All right, Anshi, back to you. Last poll question, I believe.
Yes. I'm going to launch the poll question now. The question is, how do you think most cyber frauds start? 1, the fraudster calls someone and scams them. Phishing email is clicked by someone. The fraudster hacks into a database. Or the last option D, fraudster impersonates or spoofs someone. Sorry about that typo there. It should be or spoofs someone.
Yep.
We'll give a few moments for for folks to answer. I did have a question that came through about receiving a copy of the seminar so that the audience members would have this contact information for the for the steps here 1 through 5. I know Certified has a great white page document there delineating these steps. Would you be okay with me sending that out to our audience members?
100%. Anything that would help, you bet.
I figured you wouldn't have a problem, but I figured I'd double check.
No, send them also a link to the Secret Service has a great resources page as well, and I would send them both. But yeah, we have a white paper. It's called When Minutes Matter, and it walks through all the links and different things. But even with ransomware, I know we're not talking about ransomware today, but in light of the big ransomware breach that took place earlier this year in our space with CloudStar, it's a very important topic that we now have to yet manage that side of it. Secret Service has an awesome roadmap on the preparedness against ransomware and those types of things.
Wonderful. All righty. I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll, and I will share with you the responses. Looks like 52% of the audience said clicked option B, which is the phishing email is clicked by someone in a transaction. 38% had a fraudster impersonates or spoofs someone, and then 10% had fraudster hacks into a database. And surprisingly, 0 said fraudster calls someone and scams them.
Yeah, not surprising. I mean, the stats are hard because they continue to move around. We've seen phone calls, we've seen FedEx letters, we've seen emails. There was a whole smishing thing that hit the Today Show a week or 2 ago. By and large, though, I would say 90% of it that we've seen in real estate relates back to some sort of a phishing email.
Yep.
Would you agree with that, Stephen? Phishing still is kind of the number one strategy.
Yep, phishing is the number one strategy, but don't sleep on the hacking of the databases. I'm actually glad that was mentioned, because a lot of times what these guys will do is they'll buy bulk information of compromised email addresses and associated passwords and just simply try. Sit there, they want to target your organization. They're like, okay, we have some email addresses associated with it, and they'll just try the passwords they found there, and sometimes they'll try a derivation. If your password is password 1, they'll add the exclamation point, or they'll add an extra number to see if they can crack it that way too. So it's very important you guys do keep updated security measures, such as updating your passwords, and really importantly, enable multi-factor authentication.
Yep, enabling multi-factor. Yep. So quickly, you couldn't have teed it up better. So rolling through this really quick. This is if you were ever going to have a lunch and learn or a webinar that you host for your real estate agents or referral partners, it is simply 20 minutes on how to enable multi-factor authentication and determine if their email account has been compromised by someone that is from the outside. So quickly on enabling MFA, and Anshi, we may just go a couple minutes long here, and I apologize. You go into the toolbar, and Stephen, if you got to drop, I know that
I'm good.
You're putting your cape on all the time. You go to the bar there, manage Google account. I'm showing you this on Google, but Yahoo, everyone has kind of a similar flow. Find the security tab, and in there you want to enable 2-step verification. And you want to make sure that's turned on. If it's not turned on, it will prompt you where to send the one-time code, either through a phone number, through SMS, could be a direct dial over the voice. I got a direct dial call from Google the other day, or it could be like an in-app password like Authenticator or another tool like that. So how do you determine if an email account has been compromised? So again, going into the settings, you can see the general tab there on the left. You need to go a little further.
This is very important, guys. Very important.
Yep. You need to go a little further to the forwarding tab. You click on that forwarding tab. This is where the fraudster can add a forwarding address. What does that mean? That means all email accounts that are coming into, you know, Tom at Google or Gmail.com are automatically forwarded to an address that the fraudster would put in. So they simply click on add forwarding address, they would add it, and then it would show up, and I'll show you where it shows up a little bit later, right in that screen. Then I can double down as the fraudster to say, you know what, I don't want everything that Tom gets. I just want to add a filter of certain emails or keywords that are found in emails. And I could say, hey, I want to just forward certain emails coming from the title company to this real estate agent that deal with the words closing, settlement, funds. You see where I'm going. So they can even get efficient in the email account to say, I only want emails from this title agency containing these keywords. And then they create a filter. So the other thing they do, they kind of triple down. So you can see here that if you click on forwarding and an address shows up under that first radial, their emails are being forwarded to that account. That's the number one way to show that their email account has been compromised. Then they can delete the history of the email being forwarded. So not only can I set up a forward, I can create keywords that limit or kind of refine what I want forwarded and from who, and then I can delete a copy that the forwarded even took place, like it never happened. So they just sit there silently getting all the information. And Stephen confirmed this, even if I reset my password every single day and this forwarding isn't enabled, they'll still be able to receive the emails, correct?
Yep. I can't tell you how many times I've had victims tell me, oh, I use a password app and my passwords are always updated, you know, blah, blah, blah. Well, it doesn't really matter, because if they get in and set this up, this rule still exists, even though your password's been changed. So they're still surreptitiously monitoring your email account, because they really only log in once and set this up. Most of the time, they're not logging in more than once. So it really is kind of a nefarious way to sit there and monitor your email accounts. So this is very, very important, Tom. I'm glad you brought this up. This is one of the main things we see. So not only when you go to change your passwords, go in and check to see if these rules have been set up, or have your IT be able to log, or multiple people have to approve them in your systems to make sure this doesn't happen.
Yep, 100%. So again, if you log in, or your real estate agent logs in, you would be doing a huge favor to walk through this with them. And there's an email address, and that radial is clicked forward to, their email has been compromised. They need to disable it. Then they need to enable multi-factor authentication to keep that guy out. Here's the other thing that's interesting. You can add filters and blocks. So not only can I forward emails that come from a certain title company, I can block emails that are coming from a certain title company, and then I can impersonate that title company to a buyer or whoever it happens to be. So what's interesting here is they can even create a blocking filter so that for the next 5 days, they're not getting information. The real estate agent isn't getting information from Acme Title. They can impersonate Acme Title and take over the whole communication stream. Similarly with Facebook and with Instagram. So I want to show you just some other popular sites. You go to security and login, use two-factor authentication, and then you can use it through an authentication app like Duo or Authenticator. You can take an SMS. There's a token that can pass between trusted devices. That's the last one. And because Insta is owned by Facebook, very similar flow. Settings, security, enable two-factor authentication. Again, for those of you that aren't aware of two-factor authentication, you have a username, you have a password, you have a one-time code. That one-time code enables you unique access every session you log into that account. And then you can connect the tokens of the trusted devices so that if you store it as a trusted device, you don't have to access or do that every single time. All right, we could talk for the next 2 hours. Anshi, I wanted to open up for questions. It was a good discussion, though.
I mean, I know that was a lot of information to everybody. So if you can stay on, great. We'll do some questions as well. But yes, Tom, thanks for putting your contact information. So if you have any specific questions, they can reach out to you. Or if you have any questions for our security title staff, we'd be happy to answer them as well. So jumping right into the questions, I'll just kind of go through them in chronological order as they came in. So first question was, and it was a little bit of a statement on the industry, as you guys alluded to as well, but The question was, how is it that in 2021, the banks or lenders don't have the technology to stop wire fraud? And then sub-question, at what point will banks be able to be held responsible for allowing bad actors to open accounts for the sole purpose of committing fraud?
No, two great questions, and two that Stephen's going to skirt to the side on, but I will gladly answer my opinion. So my opinion is this, the second question. The banks under UCC Article 4A have strong federal precedents that provides a safe harbor for the electronic transfer of funds. And what I mean by that is if you've looked at court cases involving real estate wire fraud and banks getting sued for this very reason, how could you not understand this was a fraudster opening the account? How could you not appreciate that, you know, a middle-class person receives a $50 million wire overnight? I mean, how could that not get flagged, right? And it's because under Article 4A, they're leaving the responsibility of funds transfers into the hands of the person that owns the funds, and that's the account holder. And they're pivoting out on summary judgment, meaning these aren't even going to trial, guys. These are getting kicked out way early in discovery, saying, look, bank is required to verify the identity of the person that is authorizing the release of funds, making sure that that identity connects with the authority within that account. If they have a match on that, they will release the funds. And it's almost like I'm going to put my blinders on and I'm just following your lead, deposit customer. Relative to how could we not have the technology, the challenge with Know Your Customer. So under Dodd-Frank, we went into the Know Your Customer rules, KYC, right? KYC is if I have somebody opening an account for the first time, there's a series of questions and screens and background things that need to take place. But that's not the problem. These are law-abiding citizens with no criminal record that are being manipulated into receiving funds, thinking they're helping somebody online, thinking they're working for a legitimate enterprise, and in fact, they're working for a cyber syndicate behind the scenes that's laundering money. And Know Your Customer cannot detect intent of a transfer. It can only say, based on history of this individual's personal profile, they either are or are not a person that we can allow to do business with from a banking perspective. I think the other question we get a lot is, what about name and account matching? Why doesn't the Federal Reserve, if it says it's going to Mr. Cooper, but it's actually going to Ted Smith, why doesn't it just automatically get kicked back? And if you guys have seen recent testimony from the Fed chairman, he's punted now on 3 occasions when asked about real estate wire fraud and account matching. And I think again, this is one guy's opinion, that means nothing, but there's so much money moving in real time that even a small hesitation to do an account match, hey, I'm paying off ABC Builder LLC. Well, I set it up to ABC Builder, L period, L period, C period. You could register in the state of Michigan both entities as separate entities because of the punctuation. Match or no match, right? So I don't mean to oversimplify it, but I can tell you right now, based on where the courts are and what we're seeing at bank activities, some banks are trying to use machine learning and AI to do a better job to detect anomalous behavior, to reach out to make sure nothing funky's going on. But to say that there's a legal obligation, I don't see that in the near term right now, where the banks are going to step into this.
Yeah, that's really tough. Something so intuitive as just like match the account name is a lot harder to actually implement and do, and there's the whole legal side of that thing. So thank you very much for that, Tom.
No, it just is because I could buy credentials on the dark web, and I could go in and get a fake ID, and I could create a synthetic identity. It's done all the time. I could create a Sun Title of Ohio and have it registered within 30 minutes with an EIN number. So they go and say, hey, I'm paying off Sun Title, or I'm sending money to Sun Title. Yep, there's a match, and it sends into Sun Title, and it's a completely different entity under different control. So it seems simple, but it gets complex or nuanced pretty quickly. And when you're dealing with literally trillions of dollars moving probably every hour for the reserve, they don't work off nuance. It would grind the whole system to a halt.
Yeah, that's very true. The next question we have is, and I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. Within the scope of real estate wire fraud or wire losses, what percentage would you say occur as a cash to close, earnest money, buyer side fraud versus a payoff versus a seller proceeds fraud?
Steven, I mean, I call it a box of chocolates. They're all coming in.
Yeah, it's you know, we don't have definitive percentages, and they are attacking all of them. As Tom had said earlier, they're hitting out every step of the transaction. And Tom, you have the anecdote of one where it was they failed to attack on the buyer to close, but then on the same file got the the proceeds or the payoff at the end. They did multiple attacks in the same file. So you know, it's across the board, and you know, every one is impactful, but think about, you know, what hits home the most, at least for me when I'm investigating these, are the ones that really affect individuals with their life savings and their homes, and just the stories are tremendously sad. So, but across the board, we see it pretty distributed.
Wonderful. Next question, it was just, I'm sure on a lot of our audience members' minds is, are the majority of diverted funds recovered? How successful are we in recovery?
Yeah, I think it's a component of two things. It's timing and the sophistication of who's behind the actual fraud. So from a timing perspective, what we've seen, if it's same day or next day, there's a pretty good chance that something will likely be there, whether it's the commission that the mule was making, or just the money didn't transfer to the end destination yet, but call it today or tomorrow, pretty good chance. You start to get into day 3 through day 5, and it tails off very quickly. And the challenge is, once it leaves that initial receiving bank, it gets converted to crypto, pulled out in cashier's checks, pulled out in cash, gift cards, subsequent wires. It's wired overseas. That's where it really depends on if you have a kind of a professional mule that this is what they do and they're going to move it within hours of the next day, or you have a non-complicit mule that thinks they're helping some online dating relationship person and hasn't received the instructions of what to do next. But time matters, and that's what's hard with payoffs, is that typically you don't learn of the payoff fraud until the seller calls and says, hey, I just got a late payment statement. It's been 45 days. What the heck's going on? And that's why it's a real challenge.
Yeah, that's tough. We're in a digital age where everything happens at a blink of an eye. So that first, like you said, when your outline of first 5 hours, these are the steps that need to be done. It really is imperative.
It's just true. Yeah, it's just true. Don't try to go this alone, guys. If you don't have a plan in place, get people that really understand what they're doing in this area, because every time the Fed shuts down at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock local time, that risk vector goes up to be able to have money in the account that next morning when it reopens.
Our next question is probably a question better for Stephen, or Tom could probably answer, but Stephen probably is good. In reference to notifying federal authorities, is there a preference with contacting FBI or Secret Service?
No preference. We all work these, not only FBI and Secret Service, but also HSI, Homeland Security investigations. Postal inspectors work these. IRS works them. Across the board, we all work together as a full team from federal law enforcement. So, I mean, obviously, right now, the most accessible way to report these is through ic3.gov. But again, whatever you're comfortable with, and we recommend, guys, as businesses, make these contacts early. Reach out to your local field offices. See if there's any events being offered by either a Secret Service or FBI local field office. We have really good resources. We call them our CFTFs, our Cyber Fraud Task Forces, in these local field offices that are there to assist you guys. So if you can get with them early and know who to identify, know who to call, they know how to get to us and to get the response program running very quickly. So it doesn't matter, whoever you're comfortable with reaching out to, we're all in this together.
Wonderful. And then one more kind of sub question to that there. The question is the federal government actively pursuing these types of criminal organizations, which the assumption is that they're overseas, in order to shut them down?
Yes, doggedly. It's my number one priority. It's what I do. We are locating these people and we are getting them.
And I just had a follow up to the contacting the federal agencies. I think there's, we see what's on TV and a little bit of the glamorization there, and normal people don't just pick up the phone and say, I'm calling the FBI, I'm calling the Secret Service. So, it's a little bit scary, a little bit, overwhelming sometimes, that feeling. What can someone expect in terms of the communication or style of communication?
I mean, we're all people. So we're all people. Other agencies, some are more formalized than others, and it all depends, like what the individual you speak with at that particular organization and at that time too. I mean, we operate 24/7, so it's whoever would be on the duty desk or receives a call at that time. But we are all people. Do not be intimidated. Reach out, please, and just we're secretservice.gov. You can go and find the local field offices there. Same thing with FBI. Actually try to be very accessible for you guys for these type of crimes. So please, don't hesitate to reach out. Don't be intimidated, anything like that. Let us know.
Thank you for that. And it's good to know that you guys put your pants on just like I do, one leg at a time, unless there's some secret technique you guys have that I just don't know about.
Now, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that. I'm sorry.
And then our final question is going to be a little bit of a toss-up to Tom here. But how can certified help agents avoid a cyber fraud event?
Well, it's just what we talked about today. It's just a layer of security. So I subscribe as a title agent, and we use certified. But the deal, guys, is the upfront education and awareness and intention on this issue starts to create the framework where you can use technology and you can use resources like that to have success. So we have the ability to confirm the identity and bank credentials before money moves. I mean, that's a system we created because I was concerned that human error of my staff and our customers would lead to subsequent breaches after we had our incident. So our ability to quickly do that, we're integrated with almost every title production platform. And then we have Lloyd's of London as a partner that will actually ensure each wire up to $1 million when you send it out. So I know we have a lot of customers on the phone. I love the fact that we're on the call today, and I love the fact that you're tuning in for just another refresh of this education. But Anshi, I'd love a sidebar conversation to learn a little bit more about, the concern of each agent and how we can, where and how we fit in the workflow. But essentially, we replace callbacks on the outbound with technology that you'd never be able to gain access to from a verification standpoint. But then also for incoming, making sure that the buyer receives, confirms receipt, and is agreed to follow those instructions before they send their life savings in. And all that's done in less than a 60-second interaction with the customer. So
that's great. Thank you, gentlemen, both. We're coming to the end of our time today. I know we went a little bit over for those folks watching. And if you have any questions that linger, feel free to contact Tom or your security title representative. I know our state and agency managers are here to help you and guide you through this. And again, thank you for joining us, and we look to provide more educational opportunities like this in the future.
Great. Anshi, thank you. Stephen, thanks for the time, man.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See ya.